Did you know the Anglo Saxon Celtic people share many of the same beliefs, laws, customs, traditions, ceremonies, and emblems as the Biblical Israelites? They even look the same, with their fair skin, rosy complexions, and blond and reddish hair. The chances of two different people sharing so many similarities, many of which are unique only to them and no other, would appear to be highly improbable, unless of course those two different peoples were in fact one and the same. Now, let's look at the main similarities between Celts and the Biblical Israelites, and you let me know in the comments section if you agree with me. Number 1, same system of days, weeks, and calendar. Moses carefully described the day as starting in the evening and being followed by the morning, as was the Israelite custom and law. In other words, the Israelites kept their day from sunset to sunset, as we can read in Genesis 1:5. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. What may be surprising is the Celts did too. Caesar explains, quote, "They count periods of time not by the number of days, but by the number of nights, and in reckoning birthdays and the new moon and the new year, the unit of reckoning is the night followed by the day." This quote was from the Celtic Empire by Peter B. Ellis, page 18. The Celts also divided time into a 7-day week, identical to that of the Hebrews. Dr. Thomas More commented that no other nation kept such a 7-day cycle, excepting only among the family of Abraham, from History of Ireland, page 54. Number 2, both feared the sky falling down. Yahweh promised Israel they would always be a nation before him, as long as the sun, moon, and stars stayed in their fixed order in the sky. And we can read about this in Jeremiah 31, verses 35 to 36, where it says, "Thus says the Lord, who gives the sun for light by day, and the fixed order of the moon and the stars for light by night. If this fixed order departs from before me, declares the Lord, then shall the offspring of Israel cease from being a nation before me." It seems this promise must have been etched into the consciousness of all Celts, for, quote, "During a feast, Alexander the Great asked the Celts what they feared most, expecting them to answer, 'You, my lord.' However, their reply was startling to the would-be conqueror of the world. 'We fear only that the sky will fall on our heads.' Their words were in fact a form of oath, which was still to be found in Irish law tracts a millennium later. End quote. From the Celtic Empire, page 76. Number 3, both believe death to be better than one's birth. To most people, the idea of one's death being better than one's birth would be abhorrent. Yet, in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 7, verse 1, King Solomon writes, "The day of death is better than the day of birth." Incredibly, the Celts also shared this seemingly strange attitude and disregard for death, as we can read in the Celtic Empire, page 17. "Thus did Philostratus of Tonra, who lived between 170 and 249 AD, observe that the Celts celebrated birth with mourning and death with joy. In fact, this is why the Celts were renowned throughout the Greek and Roman worlds for their courage and willingness to die in combat. Again, the chances of two different peoples sharing the exact same irrational fears and beliefs would appear highly improbable, unless they were one and the same people. But you let me know in the comments section. Number 4, both guaranteed the rights of women. The laws of Israel guaranteed the rights of women, including the right to inherit property, as we can read in Numbers 27 verse 8. And thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If a man die, and have no son, then ye shall cause his inheritance to pass unto his daughter. Israelite women could also be prophets, judges, and even lead the nation. We can read about one such example in Judges 4, verses 4 to 5, where it says, Now Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Labdooth, was leading Israel at that time, and the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. It is important to understand that these same rights guaranteed by Israel's law and customs were unheard of almost anywhere until relatively recently, especially during the Babylonian, Medo-Persian, Greek, and Roman empires, and then into the Dark and Middle Ages. Yet, the Celtic nations shared these exact same customs and laws too. We can read in the Celtic Empire, page 16, Women emerge in Celtic society with equality of rights. They could inherit and own property and be elected to office, even to the position of leader in times of war. There is no rule of distinction to exclude the female line from the throne or the command of the armies. This is the reason why Boudica was able to be queen of the British Celtic Iceni tribe, who led an uprising against the occupying forces of the Roman Empire in 60 to 61 AD, and why many of our greatest rulers have also been women, including Queen Elizabeth I, Queen Victoria, and Queen Elizabeth II more recently. Number 5, share the same national colours. The national colours of Israel were blue, scarlet, which is red, linen, which is white, and purple, as we can read in Exodus 26, verse 1 and verses 31 to 36. Thou shalt make the tabernacle with 10 curtains, and a hanging for the door of the tent, of blue and purple and scarlet and fine twined linen wrought with needlework. And another example in Exodus chapter 28, verses 2 to 5, Make sacred garments for your brother Aaron, have them use gold and blue, purple and scarlet yarn and fine linen. Now, interestingly, all the Anglo Saxon Celtic nations have these same national colours of blue, red and white, which can be seen, of course, in all of our flags. Charles Stewart, the superintendent of Naval Records and Library of the US Navy Department, stated in a 1970 edition of the National Geographic, quote, "The flag may trace its ancestry back to Mount Sinai, where the Lord gave to Moses the 10 Commandments and the Book of the Law, which testify of God's will and man's duty, and were deposited in the Ark of the Covenant within the tabernacle, whose curtains were blue, purple, scarlet, and fine twined linen." These colours of the Hebrew tabernacle were taken over by the early Western Church for its own and given to all the nations of Western Europe for their flags. When the United States chose their flag, it was of the colours of old, but new in arrangement and design, and they called it the Stars and Stripes. Number 6, same royal customs and traditions. According to Irish and Welsh historical records, monumental inscriptions, ancient poems and traditions, a Hebrew prophet named Alam Fala, or Jeremiah as we know him, and his scribe Baruch are said to have arrived in Ireland from Egypt around 583 BC, having escaped the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians. They came with a very important stone and a Hebrew princess named Tia or Tamar Tefi, who later married the Irish king Oha, thus ensuring the monarchy continued after King Zedekiah's death, as we can read in Jeremiah 52 verses 10 to 11. Genealogists of the British royal family have proved their ancestry goes back through this line to King David. This is further proven by the many British customs, traditions, symbols, emblems, ceremonies and laws of succession, as we can read in Numbers 27 verse 8, which are shared with the kings of Israel. One example being the Israelites' custom to crown their kings on or by a particular stone, as we can read in 2 Kings 11:14 and chapter 23 verse 3, and for the people to shout, "God save the king," as we can read in 1 Samuel 10:24 and 2 Kings 11 verse 12. This is still our custom today, with the kings and queens of Ireland, Scotland and England crowned upon the same stone for the past 2,500 years, dating all the way back to 583 BC. Edward I had a coronation chair built in 1296 AD to accommodate this stone, which is still used today. In fact, if you watch King Charles III, his coronation, you will be amazed to see almost the entire ceremony following the exact same traditions as recorded in the Bible when the Israelite kings were crowned. And yes, they shouted, "God save the king," just like our forefathers before us. Now, this stone the English call Jacob's pillow, which is battered, has a large crack and 2 iron rings attached, almost worn through, all bear witness to its long migrations, which must have occurred long before 583 BC, during Ireland's wanderings in the desert, since historians know it's only been moved 3 or 4 times since then. Israel to Ireland in 583 BC, Ireland to Scotland in 506 AD, Scotland to England in 1296 AD, and apparently back to Scotland in 1996, where it will remain until Christ returns to sit upon the throne of David, as it states in Luke 1 verses 31 to 33. Too many similarities to be a coincidence, and remember, this kingdom was to be a stone kingdom that would crush all others and then spread worldwide to become the 5th world empire, the British American Empire, as in Daniel 2 verses 31 to 45. Number 7. Laws founded on the same principles. The entire basis of Israel's law was love. Christ himself stated, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments." You can read that in Matthew 22 verses 37 to 40. Not only was the purpose of the law to protect both the individual and one's neighbour, but to also bring about the good of both. In fact, all Israelite society was based on community, with the nation divided into tribes, clans and families, as we can read in Joshua chapter 7 verse 14. Now, the Celtic society and laws had exactly the same foundation as the Israelites, for, quote, "the basis of their society was tribal." By the time the Celtic law systems were codified, the Celtic tribal system was a highly sophisticated one. Comparing the Irish system with that enshrined in the Welsh laws of Hairedadar, one can observe a common Celtic attitude to the law. The good of the community was the basis of the law, end quote. And you can read that in the Celtic Empire, page 16. Now, some might mistakenly consider the good of the community with communism. These two concepts are, of course, entirely opposite. Communism raises the state or government above all else, and since all governments are led by a small number of individuals, this always results in those same individuals being raised to God status and dictatorship. Therefore, communism puts the good of the state or individuals in leadership as the priority above all else and treats the community as worthless individuals, whereas those communities whose foundation is Yahweh's law, based on the good of the community, remember and acknowledge that communities are individuals and families that live within them. These societies recognize that everyone that makes up the particular community is equal under the law and of equal importance. Therefore, the good of the people is paramount, and the state is simply the servant or protector of those same people. Every individual is required to provide for themselves and their families, and in doing so, get to enjoy the fruit of their labour. As such, individual and family improve their lot. The whole community also benefits. This is why the Celtic societies have prospered, and let's remember it was Britain who later became the first ever Christian people and nation in 556 AD by act of its government, being founded upon the very commandments, statutes, and judgments given by God to the Israelites at Mount Sinai. The English Common Law, Magna Carta, and Bill of Rights, etc., broadly based, though imperfectly, on God's law given through Moses. It was on this foundation that the Christian work ethic of hard work developed, motivated by the promise that each individual be able to enjoy the benefits of their own labour and improve their lot and that of their family. As a result, the Western Anglo Saxon Celtic Nordic nations have surely prospered. Number 8, same government structure. Now, Israel was overseen by 70 elders whom the people elected to be officers over the, quote, thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. These men also served as judges. They were to be capable men who feared Yahweh, were trustworthy, and hated dishonest gain. We can read this in Numbers 11 verse 16, where it says, "And Yahweh said unto Moses, Gather unto me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom thou knowest to be the elders of the people, and officers over them." And further in Exodus chapter 21 verse 27, "But select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officers over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens." Wow, what kind of governments and nations might we be living under if we had only remembered these basic criteria for selecting our leaders? We certainly wouldn't be facing the evil that we are today, in my opinion. Now, the Celts also selected officers and judges to rule and lead the people, as we still do today, when we elect MPs and congressmen to represent us. As it states in the Celtic Empire, page 16, chieftains were elected, as were all officers of the tribe. And on page 95 of the same book, Strabo says each tribe was divided into 4 septs. Each sept was ruled by a chieftain and 2 sub-chieftains with a judge. That the 12 septs sent a total of 300 elected officials, or representatives to an assembly at the main centre of Drun Minton, the Sanctuary of Oaks. The form of government described by Strabo as existing among the Celts of Galatia is paralleled by the Assembly of Gaul. The Greeks referred to the state the Commonwealth of Galatians, and it is true that the name of no particular overall leader emerges for a long time, end quote. Just as Israel's elected leaders would meet at the city gate to conduct and oversee important business transactions, judge court cases, and make public announcements, so do the Celtic nations today. So too is the idea that this must all be done in public, whether in court or parliament. The public are invited and able to watch and witness the proceedings. And just as the elected leaders of Israel were to be capable men who feared Yahweh and were trustworthy and hated dishonest gain, even today MPs must swear an oath to be faithful and bear true allegiance according to law before beginning. Sadly, I think that we do not hold them to account as they should be. Of course, let's not forget that just as Israel had a monarchy who was assisted by the Levites, public servants, elected elders and judges to administer the kingdom, so do we today. Number 9, trial by jury. The right to a trial by jury or one's peers is a very important part of the common law system of Britain and indeed all other Anglo Saxon Celtic nations. This right to a public trial is actually also rooted in ancient Israel law, where trials were held at the main entrance of every city and town where the public could observe all proceedings. And we can read this in Deuteronomy 16, verse 18. Judges and officers shall thou make thee in all thy gates throughout thy tribes, and they shall judge the people with just judgment. Now, under Yahweh's law, not only were trials held publicly, so were executions, as we can read in Deuteronomy 17, verses 2 to 5. If there be found among you any man or woman that have wrought wickedness, then shalt thou bring forth that man or that woman unto thy gates, and shall stone them till they die. Many other Anglo-Saxon Celtic traditions, such as the number of members of any jury being 12, also originated from Israelite law. Number 10, stones. Even a casual reader of the Old Testament stories won't help but notice Israel's fascination with stones, including their habit and custom of erecting stone altars, memorials, and markings everywhere they went. For example, in Joshua 4, verses 4 to 7, Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, and said unto them, Go over into the middle of the Jordan, take up a stone, to serve as a sign among you. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. The Celtic people also shared the same fascination and custom of erecting uncut stone pillars or standing stones all over Europe and especially in Britain, with Stonehenge and Avebury Stone Circle and the standing stones in the Britain village of Cannock, as just a few of hundreds of examples. Dr. Thomas More, in his History of Ireland, page 40, states that most common of all Celtic monuments, the cromlech, is to be found not only in most parts of Europe, but also in Palestine. Not less ancient and general among the Celtic nations was the circle of upright stones with either an altar or tall pillar in the centre, and like its prototype at Gargil, ancient Israel, serving sometimes as a temple of worship, sometimes as a place of national council. The rough, unhewn stone used in their circular temples by the Druids was the true observance of the divine command delivered to Moses. If thou wilt make me an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone, for if thou lift up thy tool upon it, thou have polluted it. That was in Exodus 20, verse 25. Dr. Buford in Judaism Revive said, "It is remarkable that all the ancient altars found in Ireland were originally called Bothel, or the house of God, and they seem to be of that same species of those mentioned in the book of Genesis, called by the Hebrews Bethel, which has the same signification as the Irish Bothel." The book Identity of the Religions, Judaical and Hebrew, adds, quote, "Circular temples abound in England and other parts of Europe. The most ancient account of them is to be found in the book of Exodus, chapter 24, verse 4. And Moses builded an altar under the hill, and 12 pillars, according to the 12 tribes, page 15. In Europe, Stonehenge, Avebury, and many other early Celtic sites, there are many examples of similar circular pattern designs. It is interesting that Daniel described a stone kingdom that was prophesied to destroy the Babylonian, Medo-Persia, Greek and Roman empires, but itself grow to fill the whole earth and never be destroyed itself. Daniel 2, 44-45. Isn't it fitting that the Celts played an important part in destroying each of these empires, and that it was the British that would eventually grow to become the world's fifth and largest ever empire, and certainly expanded around the whole earth as prophesied, an example that still exists within the Commonwealth and the United States of America. Number 11, groves and oaks. The importance of worship under oaks in Judaism is well known, and the oak tree also featured predominantly in Celtic culture. Greek historian Strabo in the 1st century AD reported that the Celts, quote, sent a total of 300 elected representatives to an assembly at the Century of Oaks, end quote. Plimley said of the Celts, quote, "They esteem nothing more sacred than the mistletoe and the tree on which it grows, provided only that the tree is an oak. But apart from this they choose oak woods for their sacred groves, and perform no sacred rite without using oak branches." End quote. What isn't well known are groves and oaks were also features of Israelite worship. For example, Abraham made an altar unto Yahweh, who appeared unto him near the oak of Morah, in Genesis 12, 6-7, and called on the everlasting God from a grove planted by his own hand, Genesis 13, 4, and also built an altar unto Yahweh near the oak of Moreh in Hebron, Genesis 13, 18. Joshua took a large stone and set it up there under the oak, near the sanctuary of Yahweh in Joshua 24, 26. Gideon worshipped Yahweh under an oak tree in Judges 6, 19-24, and we are told the Israelites sacrifice upon the tops of the mountains and burn incense upon the trees under oaks in Hosea 4:13. Number 12. Celts and Israelites both had the same priesthood. According to the laws of Yahweh, the Levites had a very important position and function within the nation of Israel. You could say they functioned as the government under the king, acting as the priests, administrators of the national laws, judges, civil servants, record keepers, teachers, security and worship leaders, etc. In this way they assisted the king in administrating the kingdom of Israel. It is interesting that within Celtic society they also had a priesthood who performed these same duties and responsibilities as the Levites did. The Celtic priesthood were called Druids. If we read the Celtic Empire, page 17, it says, the Celtic religion was administered as well as all Celtic learning, law, and philosophy by a group called the Druids, first mentioned in the 3rd century BC. To the Greeks and Romans, the Druids were described as a priesthood, but they fulfilled political functions as well, for the Druid functioned not only as ministers of religion, but also as philosopher, teacher, and natural scientist, and keeper of the law and its interpretation. Druids were often called upon to take legal, political, and even military decisions. Marcus Cicero, who lived in 106 to 43 BC, reports the Druids to have been great natural scientists with a knowledge of physics and astronomy, which they applied in the construction of calendars. The Celtic Empire, page 17. There are many other examples of customs linking the Celtic Druids specifically with Israel. English historian William Borlase, in his Antiquities of Cornwall, 1754, presented many pages of such evidence, including Druids worshipping but one god and being allowed no graven images identical to the Hebrews. They both consecrated themselves by the sprinkling of blood, wore white similar to the Levite priests. Bulls were sacrificed. They prayed with uplifted hands and held the oak of veneration, etc. Page 104 to 132 and 161. In these and so many other distinctive ways, the religious customs of the Celts and Israelites bear an unmistakable resemblance. Number 13, both preferred single-handed combat. In ancient times, the Israelites often decided battles by single-handed combat. The armies would let the champions fight it out, and that way not as many people had to die. The most famous account of single-handed combat in history was between David and Goliath. In the Celtic Empire, page 19, it says, "For oft times as armies approached each other in line of battle, with their swords drawn and their spears raised for the charge, these men come forth between them and stop the conflict, as though they had spellbound some kind of wild animals. Thus, even among the most savage barbarians, the Celts preferred to settle warfare by means of single-handed combat between the chieftains or champions of the opposing armies rather than a pitched battle between opposing forces. In their early conflict with the Celts, some Roman commanders would accept the Celtic form of resolving the battle, but the custom was frowned upon by the Roman Senate, decreed in 340 BC that henceforth no Roman should enter into single combat with a Celt to settle military disputes. One might think that the Celtic method of two men, the leaders of the army, settling the outcome of a military conflict by this means was a little more civilized than the Roman method of total warfare and devastation by large enemies. So, if you are a Celt or of Anglo Saxon Nordic origin, for that matter, and you are finding out for the first time that we are the true descendants of the Biblical Israelites, then the question is, what will you do now? The Bible is true and you are one of the people of the book. It contains your family history, customs, traditions, law, health, prosperity, redemption, salvation, and life. Will you turn back to Yahweh, the God of our forefathers? Will you repent and submit to Jesus, our kinsman, redeemer, and king? These are important questions. We are at the end of the age, and Jesus is coming again. He's at the door. What will you do? Will you choose good or evil, life or death? For more information, please visit revealingthetruth.weebly.com or watch more of my videos on YouTube or BitChute. Thank you.